Here we go, babe. On this video, I am going to begin now part 2 of Greek grammar. And again, I'm following my own grammatical summary in the work, A Brief Introduction to Greek Grammar, as well found in the book of Hebrews, a work I have done, Christological Greek Grammar and the Sevenfold Work of Christ and His Finished Redemption. And this is found on YouTube under my name, Dr. Gary Stats. So I'm looking at the front of that where I did put up a little grammar. So we're looking at the present tense and the present indicative active. And what many grammarians use would be luo, meaning to lose. I was trained in Machen years ago, and that's what we used. So let me just, I'm using that myself. The present indicative active looks at present tense, and it's looking at the active action, indicating that. So we go first, second, third person, we do singular and plural. So luo, I lose, first person. Lues, you, and I learned it, thou losest, to distinguish between the singular and the plural. So luo, lues, lue is he, she, or it loses. Luamen is we lose. Luete is you, plural lose, and I learned that ye lose to distinguish between the thou and the ye. You are losing, and then losing, they lose. So it's luo, lues, lue. Luamen, luete, losing. I lose. You singular lose, he, she, or it loses. We lose, you lose, they lose. Then we have your present indicative middle. This in the middle is where the subject is acting upon itself, or it has a reflexive meaning. So luamai, I am losing for myself, but it's also can be passive. So the present indicative middle or passive, it could be I am being loose or I myself lose. So luamai was first person, lue, luatai. Lue would be you are losing for yourself, or you are being loose. Luete, he himself loses, or he, she, or it is being loose. Luamatha, we are losing for ourselves, or we are being loose. Luiste, you are losing for yourselves, or you are being loose. And luantai, they themselves lose, or they are being loose. So just to go through it again, we have luamai, lue, luatai, luamata, luista, luantai. That is your present middle or passive, and your present active would be luo, lues, lue, luamen, luate, luusi. What I would suggest is putting this on 3x5 cards, putting the translation on one side and the Greek on the other. So let's do the future. For the future, you add a sigma after the stem, which is lu. So we would have luo becoming loose, luso, I will lose, or lusamai, I will lose for myself. So let me just do here the future then, luso, luces, luce, lusamen, lucite, lususin. I will lose, thou wilt lose, he, she, it will lose, we will lose, ye will lose, they will lose. And then we do the future, lusamai, luce, lusatai, lusamatha, lusista, lusantai. And notice it's the same amai, a, etai endings. You're just adding a sigma between the stem and the ending. And so that is your future. The one thing about the future that I need to share a little bit is the future indicative passive, but I can wait and do that until I come to the aorist passive. That would probably be the best place. It's luthesamai, luthese, luthesatai, and so forth. But I think it'd be better to wait until I come to talk about the aorist and relate the aorist passive and the future passive. So I also want to talk about the imperfect. The imperfect views continuous action in the past. It has a prefix called an augmentation, in the imperfect and the imperfect endings. So again, the stem is lu, but the imperfect would be eluan, I was loosing. Elus, you were loosing. Elua, he, she, or it was loosing. Eluamai, we were loosing. Eluate, you were loosing, plural. And then eluan, they were loosing. So we look at the imperfect indicative active. Eluan, elus, elue, eluamen, eluate, eluan. And again, I would put this on 3x5 cards or vocabulary cards, and I would look at, I think, 3x5, and then put vocabulary on vocabulary cards. That is the way I first learned these different endings and conjugations when I first started Greek. So then we have the imperfect indicative active, middle and passive. Elu amen, I myself was loosing, or I was being loosed. Elue, you yourself was loosing, or you were being loosed, with an eta, you're the subscript. And then luete, he himself was loosing. Luamatha, we were loosing for ourselves in the middle or passive, or we were being loose. Luista, you yourself were loosing, or you were being loosed, and luanta, they themselves were loosing, or they were being loosed. So thinking about the imperfect, it would be eluan, elus, elue, eluamen, eluata, eluan. That is, I was loosing, you were loosing. And then the middle and passive, eluamen, elue, eluata, eluamatha, eluasta, eluanta. And I would just review my notes if you'd like to learn from that, or any Greek grammar would be summarizing these at the end when they give a summary of the paradigms or the conjugation. Then I want to look at the aorist briefly. The aorist views action as completed, normally in the past, but you can have futuristic aorists or other aorists looking at completed action, but it's normally in the past, and it takes a prefix agma epsilon, which is added to the stem with a suffix sa. So elusa would be I loosed. The augment epsilon and the lu, the stem, and the sa suffix. So it would be elusa, elusas, eluse. I loosed. You or thou loosest. He, she, or it loosed. Elusamen, we loosed. Elusate, you loosed, or ye loosed. Elusan, they loosed. So the active again of the aorist, elusa, elusas, eluse, elusamen, elusate, elusan. And the aorist middle would be elusamen, eluso, elusate. I loose for myself would be the aorist middle. Eluso, you loose for yourself. Elusate, he, she, or it loose for himself or herself or itself. Elusamatha, we lose for ourselves. Elusaste, ye lose, plural, for yourselves. And then elusanta, they lose for themselves. So going through the aorist middle again, elusamen, eluso, elusata, elusamatha, elusaste, elusanta. And it's just good to try to nail these down in the memory so that when you're looking at a verb, think of how this conjugation is formed and you'll be able to figure it out. So elusa, elusas, eluse, elusamen, elusate, elusan. That's your aorist indicative active. And then elusamen, eluso, elusata, elusamasa, elusasta, elusanta would be your aorist middle indicative. I'm going to stop there and keep the aorist passive and connect it with the future passive, because that's, I think, a good place to stop and pick up both the aorist passive and the future passive.